This is just one new angle on things and shouldn't be mistaken as being the answer to life or what life is all about. A little disclaimer here. Be sure to read the disclaimers beneath this video and the one on my website called PrestonFlatt.com. And don't attempt like base jumping or wingsuit flying without proper training, proper conditions. Don't jump or do anything dangerous. Don't try doing it without a wingsuit. Don't do anything dumb, in other words. It's too dangerous and you might get hurt. And so that brings us to today's groovy lesson. You experience life from where you are. T.S. Monson, the Mormon leader, once said, "We can't direct the wind, right? But we can adjust the sails for maximum happiness, peace, and contentment." So the winds are a fickle thing. They're always changing and they come invisibly from some distance. If you could harness the wind and feel its arriving influence while it's still at some distance from you, then you would have more time to be exactly in the right place for its arrival. And when it reaches you, you would already be in the best position. With fewer surprises, you would be steadier and safer. But commonly in life, it seems like there's not much time to adapt. And that's because changing conditions can happen way fast. There is a way, though, that you can set things up within the human frame like a scale, or like the way the image stabilization in your camera works, responding instantly to keep steady. Heck, the camera can do it. I mean, you can be on a bumpy road and somehow the picture's just smooth as glass. So there's some principle involved there that people can also do to be steady in the midst of a changing world. It's like the way a rodeo rider on a horse, he doesn't just wait around to be bucked off and then mismatching the moment, wait around to respond, but rather he or she, or whoever it may be, is so dialed in that it seems hardly possible that the change can even arrive too fast for them. And that's called being in the zone. When things are done right, the person will be spot on and relaxed, fully arrived, and altogether exactly on track to comfortably respond to the continuing changes in a leisurely and comfortable way as they present themselves, more capable of adapting to life and handling it. And comfort is possible from being on track and knowing that you're on track, by the way. You're going to go through life and get things done anyway. So why suffer any more than needed? If you didn't have to keep mismatching the world, being off track and having to redo things, your life could be a lot better. What if you could just tweak a few things here and there and train to have your responses so in gear and so on track that you could have less wear and tear on your body, mind, and spirit? That is what setting up the equivalent of a scale and surfing the place between opposites is about. From exactly where you are, the manifold creation ceaselessly arises and falls. Life presents itself before you in ever new ways that have never happened from the beginning of the world. Each presentation is unique. Let me say it this way. Each presentation is a unique invitation to either abide or to go out. And that is the game of life. If you go out, it tends to stir things up in the world, creating more things, more unfinished business. If you abide, somehow you participate in the reconciliation of the world, because the world presents itself, and you, rather than mismatching it, you respond in a way that doesn't overreact or underreact, but in a balanced way, which tends not to buck out or reject or detach from the presenting changes. Instead, you welcome them in a balanced way. So we are pilots of the human frame and intention. When someone's dressed in a wingsuit, the wings of the suit extend out from the sides of the body. This effectively divides the body into front and back. It's possible to surf and abide in the place between up and down, between too high and too low. It's possible to surf that sweet spot, the place between early and late, between up and down. It's possible to experience something similar to using a wingsuit, but without doing anything dangerous, such as jumping out of a flippin' plane or off of a cliff. Please have some self-control and don't do that. It would seem that knowing how to abide in the middle of a changing world would require the most exquisite attention to every detail of life's 10,000 changes. All the sights, sounds, feelings, tastes, smells, and thoughts. How in the world could a person possibly do that? But there is a shortcut, a way that by taking no thought, you can abide and rest comfortably in the changeless place between opposites. So this article that I'm going over today is a continuation of the information in the video and in the matching article on PrestonFlatt.com called How to Surf or Skateboard Without a Board. If you haven't read that yet, you can find the video on my channel, or you can find the article on my website. So how relaxation buys time. If you're riding in a car stiffly on a bumpy road, it's going to rattle your teeth. But relaxation is a spring. It's a buffer. It's a way to buy time, because the change arrives contacting at first the outer levels, and where there's softness, there's time. Soft time before it arrives at the center. In that soft time is the space needed to move, align, put ducks in a row, prepare, and respond. Rodeo riders use this principle to buy time and to be spot on. You may have seen it yourself. When they're stiff, they go flying off like a statue in one awkward piece. If they hit the ground like that, something's going to snap right off. But if they're relaxed and flexible, they aren't stuck in the one position. They can continue to position themselves over time on a gradient throughout the arrival of each inquiry of pressure arriving from the external world. And they can move within that softness to return to hold to the place of balance. So they for sure benefit from flexibility and softness. And so does a fighter when relaxing away from punches that would land, finding the time to move out of the way. So you might have heard of these things called zero-gravity planes. It's an airplane that flies in such a way like this. They call it parabolic flight, right? Those are the planes that when they fly them in that way, the people inside the plane, they get to actually experience simulated weightlessness. So from zero gravity planes, we learn that it's possible to enter into and surf the place that exists between up and down, an unearthly place seemingly beyond the reach of Earth's gravity. So the ceiling of the plane, the ceiling and the floor, and the two walls of the zero gravity plane correspond to the scale which we set up within the human frame. If a person knows where to look for it, how to obtain it, and then can surf it, they can abide in the sweet spot between opposites relative to the interior of the plane, of the diving plane. So there's a left and a right, there's an up and a down, and without a plane, it's also possible to find the place between opposites and to practice abiding there no matter how the world moves and changes. In the zero gravity plane, while within the bounds of gravity, it's possible to go seemingly beyond gravity to a seemingly unearthly place, transcending the opposites of up and down, and to surf the sweet spot in the midst of those opposites, hovering as if weightless between the ceiling and the floor of the plane. So there's a difference between the zero gravity plane and surfing the mystic scale, though. In the zero gravity plane, the pilot is the one that controls the up, the down, the right, and the left. So this means that something external has control of that. The pilot can duplicate and arrive at that place on demand like clockwork. So it's not a hit or miss thing anymore. It's a scientific thing. You just have to know how to arrive at the place between up and down, the place between left and right. When you, however, set up the mystic scale, you are the one that gets to establish the right and the left borders, and also the borders of too high and too low. And in the midst of the changing world, you get to fly the equivalent of the plane. So the flying of your life's plane, your orientation in life, is under your control. And you can duplicate and arrive at that place, the place between opposites, on demand, like clockwork. You're free to experience it anywhere, in any direction, at any speed. You are the one that flies it. You have control of your abiding place relative to the presenting up and down, relative to up and down, right and left, relative to the external changing world. So we've already talked about the right and left in the articles about surfing and how to surf without a surfboard. And we've talked about the idea of setting up the equivalent of a scale by using the human frame to gather 2 points and surf the center, the place between opposites. Establishing this essentially forms a flat-on facet or facet, depending on how you like to pronounce it, like that of a gem, a G-E-M, gem, that can be kept squared up, held to, and devoted to something, no matter the changes in the surrounding presentations of life. In devotional practice, you get dialed into this place and you square it up to the changeless. Its borders are formed by the selection of the points, which is not different than what is said in the verse, gathering 2 or more in my name and holding to it. Even if they're just points, the gathering of 2 or more can be done in such a way as to establish the equivalent of a scale and to abide in the midst of them. There was a Taoist person, a follower of Lao Tzu, named Zhuangzi, and he had the example of a butterfly. And my phone's flipping ringing here. Take that, Zhuangzi. No. Okay, so he had the example of a butterfly, and I'm going to pause this. Like I was saying, nothing in the outer world should mess with you. Not even the ringing of a phone. Oh, that's too good. Okay, man, so we're back to talking about Zhuangzi. So just turning the head or lifting a fingertip affects the whole. And this is experienced in a wingsuit. And this matches Zhuangzi's example of the butterfly, which just by flapping its wings affects and influences the entirety of creation, the entirety of the world around it. The butterfly has two wings, one on each side, and like this. I am a butterfly now. And he gathers them changelessly. He gathers them toward the changeless place at his own heart and extends them equally, evenly in flight. The net change equaling 0 as it samples the world around it. It rests essentially unchanged evenly between them in the midst of the wings, in the place of its very self. The slight variations in this affect and influence its place in creation outwardly. As changing sights, sounds, and experience roll up around it, presenting new samplings to its place and literally a new world around it. Just like the slightest lift of a finger can influence the flight of a wingsuit, it's possible to sample or hold 2 points on the body by placing one's mind on them. And I explained that in that article about how to surf or skateboard without a board. You can practice abiding in the place between front and back, between up and down. Though not visible necessarily, you too have a side plane, a place between front and back. And if you lift your arms to the horizontal, you too form a kind of a cross. The horizontal arms represent the horizontal axis, the place between up and down, between too high and too low. And the vertical axis represents the place between right and left. And see, that forms a cross. Not too high, not too low, not too much to the right, not too much to the left. And that's the mystical cross. So I did an internet search on the mystical cross, and they had these palm readers, of all people, that figured out, oh yeah, if a couple lines cross in this way, then that's the mystical cross. But no, man, sorry, that's not the mystical cross. Here I am. Sorry, man, I don't want to say anything bad about you, but basically the real mystical cross is when you can abide in the place that's between too high, too low, and between left and right, front and back. In other words, you simply abide where you are, as you are, and you're able to do that because you're able to do that essentially anyway, but if you are able to gather 2 or more points and set up the equivalent of a scale, then this gives you like a reference, like, as the world presents itself, as creation arises, how in the world am I possibly able to do what is mentioned in Scripture, which is abide in me? How in the flippin' world are you going to even know how to do that? You're just not going to know. But if you can gather 2 or more points, set up the equivalent of a yoke or a scale, then you can abide in the midst of them because you have that as a reference. And so you can experience this way of being in the world flat on, facing creation, as the pure, untouched facet or facet of a gem. When changes arise, surf the place of the mystical cross just like a wingsuit. You modify posture so that the net change is 0 and abide. You hold fast to the center. You do what the verse says, love me more than these. And when you see the word me, I'm not talking about me over here, given the video presentation. When you say me, you should, point to yourself when you do that, because that's the ground zero of your own existence. So hold fast to the center. And when you do, perhaps in the beginning, you may have bigger adaptations or modifications at first, just like somebody learning to skateboard or surf, with overcorrections. But then they become smaller and smaller as you get better at it. And eventually, you get so balanced that hardly anything in the world can present itself in such a way so as to throw you off. Unless it's a flippin' phone ring and turn a video. Hey man, literally a flippin' phone. Okay, we're talking old school here. So you sense earlier and earlier the arising of change and learn how to surf its exact remedy, which is self-evident and instructive, because the very instant you start to lean outward into the world, you'll sense it and you can move back. You literally use the human frame as a tool. That's what I'm trying to say. This could be one of the main reasons. I don't know. It's one of the reasons that you have a body. That you can sense the departure from balance and you can abide in the place between opposites. So you bring it back as at the first. So as at first arising, that which would depart, you just bring it back. And that is conserving time. You can literally sample anywhere that you can set up the equivalent of a scale. So you just set up the scale as you are. But then in the outer world, you can also form like a correspondence. Essentially gathering, that verse says, gather 2 or more in my name, right? So you've gathered the 2, but distantly you can gather 2 more. Almost like a sniper, right? Ideally the sniper would be balanced, but then they look through the scope at some distant object way over there. I mean, just way, way out there. But they establish their witnessing, their attendance. They attend that place, basically, the target, the distant object, by not departing too far above it, not too far below it, not too far to the right of it, not too far to the left of it. And indeed the scope, you'll see crosshairs that forms once again a cross. Gee, what a coincidence. But even so, the sniper is breathing in a balanced way so as not to throw things off, right? But also distantly, that distant object of consideration is also breathing, and the sniper can literally match their breath to the distant breath, essentially entering into it, bridging the gap, and essentially sending their intention, fully attending that distant place while abiding in balance. So that's something like, it's possible to do something like that in this way also. You start off as balance, you gather 2 points, and then you can sample anywhere that you can set up the equivalent of a scale. It can be smaller, even smaller than an ant, or as big as the widest creation that you can choose, wherever you can gather not just the 2 points, but the 2 or more. You can know what's in the midst of them. So you can devotion. That's so long-winded, but let me just summarize it here. You can devotionally set up a correspondence to an object of external devotion, a direct matching. For example, to the walls of a sacred book, perhaps, like the Sikhs, they have their sacred book, or to a church, or to a temple, or to a beautiful work of art, or even to nature, just a beautiful tree, You literally can choose any place that you like and abide. Abide as you fully attend it. That's what I'm trying to say. It's hard to figure out just from that, but here's another example that might help. It's the example that's been given of the mystically draining bathtub. I don't know if you might have heard of this before. But the world can be reconciled as if steadying the water in a mystically draining bathtub. The old way was to mismatch the demands of keeping it steady and to slosh the water and get all wet, right? Gee, I don't know what I'm doing. Hey, I'm getting all wet. What's going on? The new way is that all sloshing is neutralized. There's a counter movement for each would-be slosh of the water. And that steady place can be surfed with the net change being 0. Without sloshing, the steady water in the still bathtub, the steady water forms a vortex or whirlpool at the drain. You've probably seen this, you've emptied things, and if you've gotten it just right, you could produce the whirlpool. But if you had it off, that would close up, right? So at the center of the whirlpool, this is the cool thing. You can look straight down and find a central place located exactly between opposites that is beyond change, that doesn't even get wet. Okay? This is profound stuff, man. It doesn't even get wet. How could there be a place in the middle of the draining bathtub that doesn't flippin' even get wet? It's incredible. But this represents what you have and are in the place between opposites, which is as far as the east is from the west, the heart or the center, which is the treasure hidden in a field. There's a correspondence set up between the water, between this place, for this example anyway, between the water and the borders of the tub. This center that doesn't get wet at the vortex of the whirlpool is a model of how to be in the world, but not of the world. In the tub, the bathtub of the changing world. So in the tub of the world, but not of the tub of the world. Ever untouched. Now I wanted to say that the empty place isn't only at the drain, though. It is beyond the water, beyond the tub, and beyond creation itself. So the water part of the tub is the empty place plus water. The place that doesn't get wet is the empty place minus water. But the steadiness, whether at the empty place or the consideration of the water, is the empty place itself. So so it's like you start out with something that's empty and then you just add water to it. But that doesn't mean that the empty place isn't still there. It still is. It's like if you dig a hole in the earth, you think, well, by digging this dirt, I've created this hole. No, you haven't. There was, before you dug it, the space was already there. It was the empty space plus the dirt. And then when you dug the hole, it became the empty space minus the dirt. So that's some view of how existence itself is, that it's limitless, beyond all appearances. I wanted to say, though, that when you're walking along with that tub of water, trying not to spill it, if you mismatch the world and you slosh it, can you see how it creates unfinished business? It creates the need for towels. It creates the need for a new set of clothing. It creates the need to go buy a mop and mop up the water. The need to spray the thing with mold inhibitor so the floor doesn't get moldy. I mean, all those things are necessary because you mismatched the exact demands of that place, that if you had only been able to set up a scale, you could have managed it in such a way that it didn't get caught up in more creation and more unfinished business. And that's one reason, that's one way that you could say that this doesn't create more unfinished business, or this way of practice. Some say it's beyond karma because actually I shouldn't say some say it's beyond karma, because I don't think anybody else knows about it. I mean, somebody else may have this similar way of practicing, but this surfing without a surfboard idea is kind of a new thing. So anyhow, enough of that. Let's see. Okay. So problems can also shrink way down and be neutralized with the size of the sampling. A person could fly over the earth way up high in a plane, right? And try to look down and spot just one troublemaker on the earth below. Good luck. They won't even see anybody because they're up too high. There are none to be found in this new place, removed by the size and location of the sampling. When you set up the scale, you can sample any points in existence, any size, basically any place that you can set up the equivalent of the scale. Any place that you can gather 2 or more points. And that's how you sample it, basically. But you can change your focus, is what I'm trying to say. Like if you felt like you've been kind of buried in the same old set of circumstances forever, you can change your focus, change what you look at, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel, what you taste. And you can place it in a new place, make a new sampling, and thereby have a new set of circumstances. And so life can become interesting this way. You could look at a distant, beautiful mountain and take that in, or you can take a smaller example and travel to the heart of pretty much any object of consideration in a similar way to what the sniper does, as I had previously described. You can travel to and experience that place as, and I also wrote in the article called Silence of the Tao, the spiritual exercises, the idea of going to a distant place, or at least matching the centers. That's what I'm trying to say. But you get to choose the points to abide in. So your sample could be as wide as all that is, but then being that wide, there's no border or flaw remaining to be grasped in order to make such a sample, to establish the scale. Only existence itself. So each person so you are inescapably already established in that place between opposites, exactly where you are. And no matter what you tried, if you tried to climb to the highest mountain to outclimb yourself, or swim to the deepest ocean to outswim yourself, you would still be there. So you are already effortlessly there. And so another way of looking at it is that no effort is even necessary. But by setting up a scale, it's just a new way to be in the world. It's just like not that many people are doing it. Why not try something new? So it's almost like the world has such a variety of creation, right? Such variety everywhere. But this is like another variety of how to be in the world. So why are skateboarding, surfing, and doing board sports considered spiritual? It's one thing to witness plenty of things being stirred up in the world of creation, just like slosh in the water. That's easy. That's a no-brainer. Anybody can do that. But what about unstirring them and reconciling them? This reconciliation happens in board sports with the practice of balance, surfing the changeless place between opposites, and abiding in the center as balanced in all times and places, whether you're on a wave or going down a sidewalk, or whether you're practicing surfing and skating without a board, as mentioned in my other article called How to Surf or Skateboard Without a Board. But so basically this way of practice, because you're already fully arrived at your own center and nothing you can do, you can never be other than exactly as you are. You could say that this way of practice is unnecessary, but I do like to view it as like an offering to creation itself. Just a new way to be in the world. And similarly, I think that's why surfing, skateboarding, and doing board sports are considered holy. Just the sampling of creation and surfing its sweet spot is a devotion, a service, and a gift. It's like a sail with its border on each side that's hoisted and turned to the changeless. It works whether the sail itself has any particular religious name printed on it or not also. So you could write whatever religious name across it you want. And that's because this mystical key, this philosopher's stone, is locational and not doctrinal. This sentence here is way profound, because usually it's some genius has figured out a whole bunch of stuff that you're supposed to believe in. All right, I'm going to memorize the we believes. I'm going to memorize what I believe in, even though I can't even pronounce some of the words that I'm memorizing. Okay, I got that figured out. Good. And then what else am I believing in? And then they tell you and you memorize it and stuff. But the thing about this practice is simply locational. It's not doctrinal. It's just that you abide as you are in your place, no matter how, when, or where. And so it's perhaps like setting up a movie screen and turning it flat on to the face of the changeless. There is no guesswork here, and I'll tell you how. It's like the facet of a gem, and facet or facet, depending on how you want to pronounce it, it means face, the face of the changeless. There have been writings or recordings of various religious figures that experience God face to face, But then they say, well, in this sense of like a human face, no one's seen God face to face, But facet is face, the face of the changeless. So what I'm saying is you can turn it flat on, as with the Hubble telescope, You simply dial in the coordinates exactly midway between the opposites. Turn the facet to this sacred place, square up with the original timeless face of the changeless between the points that are sampled. Then all you do is just surf that place and keep it exactly on it. You know the coordinates, you know where it is, because it's self-evident when you are off course. And as the verse says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. I'm kind of hamming it up a little. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. He'll direct it because, man, it's instructional and self-evident how not to lean, even if it's unto your own understanding. There's an example of a bucket that the mystical example of the bucket submerged in the well. So when you establish the scale and holding these points, it's like holding the walls of a bucket completely immersed, completely submerged in the water of a well. In this example, you use the walls of the bucket as these points which you sample, which you select, which you gather. You choose the borders, so you choose the borders that you sample in creation and establish the points for the right and left by gathering them. By holding the points evenly, the bucket won't collapse, wobble, or waver, and the water won't slosh, basically. But later, the walls of the bucket and the bucket itself, you realize they're not even necessary. I mean, it's just a way to abide in steadiness in the midst of a changing world. That's what I'm trying to say. For now, though, you can sample both sides or borders of the bucket, and these are used as a steady reference upon which to apply effort. What effort, you ask? The effort of all your heart, might, mind, and strength. Don't forget that in the holy writings, various scriptures, there's the teaching of abide in me. You see, when you hear those words, that's something to do. Some people say you just believe this and you're set, right? But there's still those words, abide in me, which that's something to do. So what does that mean? Does that mean you run around and do a bunch of stuff, or what, But from the viewpoint of Christian mysticism, it means to choose the one good thing. In the Bible, there's a story of Mary and Martha, where the one was doing all these tasks, toiling and spinning, busily working to get things ready. but the other one was just sitting right in front of Jesus. And then the one that was working so hard said, Jesus, she talked to Jesus. She said, man, will you please tell my sister to leave where she is and come over here and help me and do all this? But Jesus, he said, man, the one that's right in front of me has chosen the one good thing. He also said, lovest thou me more than these? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. But Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. So fully attending and devotionally abiding in me is the way to look at it. So yeah, you apply your heart, mind, and strength onto something, and if it's so vague, what the heck are you going to do? But if you consider the equivalent of like a bucket and a well, you gather 2 or more points, then you have a place to abide. It's like a yoke, you know. There's that saying that my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And I like to think of it as the yoke of the yoke of my. When you point to yourself, you say my. Not in an arrogant way, but that you give place here for the indwelling, you know, ultimate, basically. So, yeah. So we're all just a little bit more. So the walls of the bucket represent the points that you can hold in that example. And you have a way to hold the points evenly and know if you're still steady or if you're going outward. As the world presents itself, the mind may drop away from the coordinates of the bordering points, but your task is simple, just like a surfer or a skateboarder, where the points, we choose 2 points, and they have 2 points, the 2 points where their feet are onto the board, and they simply drop their center of gravity down between the 2 points, between their feet, basically. And we can do the same thing, but even without a surfboard. But even so, we surf the changeless place. We hold to it, and we rest in the center. With something on each side, the treasure is found in the heart, in the center, within. From where you sit, you can also extend the practice, like I said already, to the borders of any object of devotion, an altar, a sacred object, anything. There's that verse that says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, right? Well, a table's an altar in the place, it has its right and left. So this altar is in the place between right and left, front, back, up, and down. And the term enemies, see, you prepare a table in the presence of mine enemies, it says. Enemies simply refers to those things that would draw you out, away, or away to get caught up in the distractions of the world and its missings of the mark in the world of opposites. So the word enemies in this verse, I think they're those things that if followed would generate more unfinished business in creation by having you feel that you missed the bullseye, by having you feel that you missed the mark. But like it says, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. And you can find and surf this place. So be sure to look for that video called How to Surf or Skateboard Without a Board. I also have a video that explains how to pray prayer beads without even having prayer beads on the fingers of both hands. You literally establish and sample points on each side of the body and abide in the midst of them while using them as prayer beads, but abiding changelessly in the midst of them through all the changes. And that article is called How to Mystically Pray the Rosary with or Without Beads. Man, I was kind of long-winded today. Sorry about that, but would you be so kind as to like my videos and subscribe to them? And also visit my website, if you will, PrestonFlatt.com. Thanks. Bye.